or would you like to save all the questions for a Q&A at the end?
During's fine, no problem for me.
Perfect, amazing. So thank you all so much, and I hope you enjoy the webinar. Over to you, Howard.
Great, thanks, Debs. Thanks a lot, Chris. It was nice to read your LinkedIn profile. It was good to see your approach towards digital transformation. I really like the concept of making the people more productive rather than just buying technology to replace the people. So nice to see your approach. Looking forward to your book and the way in which you tackle it. I just see, even today, we saw how many people, I think it was PwC, were retrenching something like 11,000 people and basically saying, you know, if you can't jump onto the AI board, then you're out of here. So difficult times for us, and the transformations are going to be rather interesting. So really look forward to your approach and understanding what you do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. So I'm going to go through a few slides and I'll tell you a little bit about the backstory about what possessed me to write a book on digital mixology, or invent the phrase. And then I'll sort of give an overview of the key themes of the book. As I say, questions as you go through, or we can have a good chat at the end, up to you. You all see that, yeah? Good.
Yeah, we can all see that.
So a little bit about me. I've been working in, I did, computer science degree and then went into tech in 1990. So I'm up to 35 years of working and in various businesses. And I became a consultant about 2010 and have done a number of working with a few startups, chaired a few startups, worked for 2 big government departments in the digitization initiatives. But you can read all of that on LinkedIn. But following the book, I've branded myself the digital mixologist. I have a website and you can see my LinkedIn profile. My goal really is to convince people that it's possible with digital to not really have too many boundaries, and also to look at the ingredients you have, whether that's technology or people or data in your business, and make the best of them and try and move forward and create some momentum. So the book came out in May this year, Digital Mixology, Creating the Perfect Blend of Data, Technology and Innovation. And I think those 3 things are very well connected. There's data you have, data you don't have, there's technology you have, data you don't have. But innovation really drives those. And what I'm going to do now is move into the backstory in terms of what possessed me to do this book. So around 2016, I was a Chief Digital Officer of the Driving Vehicle Standards Agency of the UK. So they're the people who do the car testing and the driver safety testing in the UK. Big government department, huge databases, lots of complexity, and they were merging the driver and the vehicle side together. And I came in as interim chief digital officer and picked up a problematic program. And as part of that, I was working away from home and spent a lot of time with people who were also spending a lot of time away from home. And I met a guy who was actually the account director of the previous supplier to the government, and he was telling me he was retiring. And I said, okay, interesting, what are you going to do? And he said, I've built myself a gin distillery. I thought, okay, it's not the usual answer I get from people, that he's built a gin distillery in his spare time from Atos. And so I said, that's interesting. I've always had this dream of having my own whiskey distillery because I love the single malts. And he said, and obviously he's a good sales guy, he said, well, have you ever thought maybe of starting in gin? Obviously he's looking for a client for his new gin distillery. I said, why would I want to do in gin? I don't really like gin. And he said, well, you've got to think of it from a working capital point of view. You start with gin, you make some money, then you can do vodka, then you can do rum, and then you'll have enough money to build your whiskey distillery. So you can get there that way, really. Otherwise, you need to wait 10 years and spend a lot of money to launch whiskey distillery. So I said, okay, then, you know, I've always been one to experiment and like variety in life. So I found myself then making my own gin. So
Nice.
top left, you'll see samples of 2 of my gins. The pinkish one is called Crush, and the whiskey coloured one is called Cobalt Gold. This is them being bottled in the H&A factory up in Lancashire. You can see the Crush logo on the label printing line, filling the bottles and labeling them. And you can see this is, you know, before my recent diet. Quite used to enjoy my drink, working away from home, not good for you. And I just want to talk a little bit about these logos, right? So being from Liverpool in the UK and being very passionate about the area, I really went into design mode, and there's a lesson here about SAS and features that I'll come back to later. But these labels are effectively prints of old maps of Liverpool etched onto copper plating and then used to create a printed background. Yeah. For the 2 different types of 2 of the different brands of whiskey. I have to say, if you look at the little sample bottles at the top left, I was working for a major provider to the financial services industry at the time, and the drink sampling usually helped some of the more difficult meetings go very smoothly and was a good part of entertainment and the business. I then went into, we call it alpha testing. So, you know, my business was called Scouse Spirits, created a load of cocktails. Here's some of the samples at a drinks festival in Sefton Park in Liverpool. Here's a bunch of Scousers consuming all of the above. This is some of the early photography in Crete. This is my 50th birthday. You know, taking photographs that we used later of some of the gin. I got 2,000 bottles made originally. This is a relatively famous cocktail bar in Beirut with my 3rd gin chased. And then launched the business, and then went into, you know, marketing. So Cobalt Gold, which was basically, for me, it was like a rum Navy strength, 57%, designed perfect gin for the grouch in your life, you know, so we had fun with grouchy images. You know, all the staff got, you know, what did they get for Christmas? They got gin in boxes. This is a Chris style cocktail, which is like, you know, a good half pint of gin, and then getting very arty with the chased one, and the website Scouse Spirits. Yeah. So doing well at selling on Amazon. I had, you know, 1,500 bottles in Amazon fulfillment warehouses. Had my own website, was shipping, you know, directly and also from Amazon. Marketing was going well. It was all great. And then, apologies from ChatGPT for this logo. This is COVID-19 slapping a live bird. Yeah. So it all came crashing down in, you know, 2020 with the lockdowns and everything that went on in the UK, and you know, obviously challenging around the world. Not the worst thing that happened to anyone, but effectively the gin, my drinks career ended, and that was in part because effectively people just wanted the cheapest alcohol. Yeah. What they didn't want was the premium gins, the premium rums, and the premium vodkas, and all the rest of it. It was all went back to being about price. Yeah. So some reflections. You know, obviously, at that time, I went off to be the CTO of a Danish, Polish AI business doing vessel performance digital twins in the maritime industry, as you do. You know, so and the fact that I had to then wind up the gym business, I thought, well, there must be something I've learned out of this. And I thought, well, I was thinking about this guy Dr. David Clutton, and I'll call him my first recognised mixologist. So David used to work for Diageo back in the day, and he was called himself a spirits designer. And what he used to do is he talked to people about what they were trying to produce with their alcohol. So I employed David to help me with my drinks. So I said, I'd said, well, I'm thinking of this drink called Cobalt that's basically a gin for whiskey drinkers. And I don't want to mix it out with anything. I want it to be a short in a glass. Yeah. So basically I wanted it to be whiskey and I was sad it was a gin. And he created the recipe that was Cobalt Gold, and Crush. I wanted to be a fun, apricot scented, vibrant drink that was a bit of fun, and that was Crush. And then we did Chased because we wanted something that would just appeal to people who didn't want slightly crazy gins. Yeah. So David, has his process here. This is his LinkedIn profile. He obviously never uses it. But I think if you look at his, he thinks about flavorings, ingredients, flavoring essential oil. He will design the liquid. He'll do some non-functional testing, stability and shelf testing. Then he manages the build process, provides technical support, DevOps, IT service desk, sensory evaluation. I love that, about the experience, call that CX, and then legal and label requirements, compliance, And I'm thinking, well, it sounds very familiar to what I've been doing for 30 odd years in technology. I work out what good looks like, what are your requirements, architecture, build an alpha. And one of my lessons is if you think about the over engineering I did of the labels, I probably put too many features and spent too much money, but I was having a great time. Test, build, launch, market it. And then the competitive response was effectively realizing I was competing with some big boys in the industry who could sell at half the price. So that led me to start writing a book. So I started it in 2020, during the initial COVID lockdowns, thinking I've always wanted to write a book. I'll just start writing a book. And then I got distracted by 5 years of in the maritime AI industry, and we went through at least 6 mergers and acquisitions, and I also had a team in Russia which I had to exit due to everything Putin was up to. So it was a crazy 5 years, and then I finished there in April, and I thought I must finish this book, and so it was published in May 25, and I have to thank my accountability officers. So Chris Potts, who is an author and a business architect, and he introduced me to Steve Hoberman from Technis, and Neil Sampson, who's somebody who's worked with me. He comes at it from the human and HR psychology side, and has helped me in a number of businesses I've been in where I've been trying to build teams. So that's the backstory. That's really about mixology, mixologists, and to some extent I recognised in myself that that's what I tend to do in a career. I go into situations in businesses, I find where they're at, do an as-is assessment, understand what they're trying to achieve and the ingredients I have available, and then mix the best cocktail in terms of moving forward. So I'm going to now take you through some various key messages in the book. So obviously I've been looking at mixologists, and so the first mixologist I do in a book with a drink on the cover is, sorry, it's not moving very quickly. There we go. Howard, your hands up.
Yeah, Chris, I just wanted to see, are you still keen on whiskey, or is gin taken over?
Oh, well, I've got a fair bit of gin in boxes in storage, right? I'm not sure I'm ever going to run out in this lifetime. But no, I'm very much a whiskey man, really.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it wasn't so much about your taste, it was more about the process.
For me, it was about the goal. The goal was to get to a whiskey distillery, but I had such fun. I mean, sometimes in life, working with new people and doing a new thing, you have to sort of step outside of something to look at it back again. So, I mean, it was an experience of pure enjoyment, really. You know, would you like to try my sample gin? You know, I remember turning up with 6 different types of black vodka to a meeting and asking people, could they try my vodka? I mean, like, you know, if I said, could we do something about, you know, mapping out a process for DevOps in this meeting, I would have got far less excitement. But, you know, it's like you turn up with, would you like to do some R&D for me on vodkas? And you get a really good response. Yeah. So I actually now I enjoy the Chase gin. It's a very nice gin, and but I'm generally a whiskey guy and a little bit of rum at times. Yeah. So Tom Scarpello, so he's a different kind of mixologist. His business is called Revology Cars, and I thought this is a very good metaphor for technology. What they do is they have got approval to use old car designs, and then they can either restore a car if there's an old one, but generally what they do is they build you a new car with classic styling but modern technology. And I think that's an amazing metaphor for the world we're in now, where you've got lots of established business processes and ways of thinking, you know, like what e-commerce looks like, what ERP looks like, and you can reinvent a lot of those ideologies or approaches using different and modern technology. So there's a fair bit in the book about this, and obviously there's loads online you can look at for Revology. But the challenge they have is, you know, they've got a body shape, for example, that no one even imagined what an airbag was in those days. And so they have to work out how to engineer an airbag into one of these vehicles. They have to engineer modern engines into these vehicles. I guess in the future, they're going to have to work out how to fill them full of batteries, you know, as combustion engines get faded out. But the whole idea, and one of the things I love about this, and one of my messages when I consult is, and I'll come back to this at the end, you know, digital should have no constraints. So why is most of it boring? Yeah. And what I love about, you know, this era of cars is, you know, they were competing on flair and experience to some extent. And we've kind of lost a little bit of that. But so I really, really like this idea. It appeals to my values about taking something that's good to look at and filling it from a modern, safe technology, and fusing the best of those ingredients. However, I would also just like to ask you to buy $150,000 so you can get me into a Revology car and you can have a free ride. Thank you. So some key messages in the book. What does outside in really mean? So I've worked in lots of agile and service oriented developments, and you're meant to start with user research and capturing data about requirements out there in the market and understanding them through statistical quantitative research. And I found that doesn't really happen. It actually, strange enough, happened in a number of the government projects I was in, but in the private sector, less so. And so outside in, you know, is the idea of designing a system or building a system or providing, you know, data analytics solution from what the customer's real latent need is. But I've generally found that that's not what happens. If people may go and gather some data to retrospectively fit what they'd like to do anyway, or quite often these days, and I think this is a bit of a curse of the Western ideology of venture capital backed SaaS businesses, is you're told to go and find a niche, yeah, and build something, and then see if you get product market fit. And then you assume if you get some traction in the market, you're onto a winner. And then you keep expanding the product with features based on competitive analysis. But the whole idea of a SaaS platform is not really about listening to what customers want. It's very much about you have to fit in with the technology that we have built. And so that's, for me, a disconnect between outside in and inside out type thinking. And I also know in a lot of, for example, logistics businesses I've worked in, the times when you actually interact with the technology is quite often when the internal systems and processes break down. They create a digital touch point with you as a customer when they need you to do something, but less often when you would like to know or need to know. And so a lot of companies, when they design their digital, are doing it from the inside out and not the outside in. So there's quite a lot there in the book around what does outside in really mean. Howard?
Yeah, Chris, that outside in, is that the sort of customer journey approach? That's sort of what the TOGAFs are suggesting a lot at this stage, is understand the customer journey, what are their requirements, and then building the product in a minimal viable product. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, so that would be the agile or TOGAF approach to outside in. I still think for me there's a little bit about you've often framed the problem before you embark on that process. So if you're going to map a customer journey, in some extent you've already decided the frame of what you're asking the customer to do. So I'm a positive advocate of that, but I also think there's a step before that, which is, do you actually understand your customers at all? And then maybe when you just design your service or your product, you're understanding what it means to walk in their shoes before you do that. And then the next step would be then researching that, doing the quantitative analysis, mapping out the customer journey and testing it. Yeah. But for me, there's with true outside in, there's a little bit about framing the problem. And quite often it's really hard to do when you're working in a company, isn't it? You frame the problem from your inside out perspective, and then you may go on to map the journey, the customer journey, but you started off with the frame of inside out and not outside in.
What your business needs, the business goals, and then not so much the customer.
Correct. Yeah. And I like to work, challenge from the outside in, and I'll come to it a little bit later when I call it the fish tank syndrome. I was interviewing a CEO of a really great employee engagement platform the other day, but I happen to have worked in a similar business a startup in a competitive space got merged with two other startups because they reached the boundaries of the addressable market, because they'd started with an inside out, right? They started with an inside out, which was, we believe you need a survey-based employee engagement platform. And they captured data about that, very good about the data and the data analytics. But because they hadn't walked in the shoes and done an outside-in view from a chief HR officer or a chief financial officer or even employees, they'd started with this inside-out idea about the answers, some kind of survey thing, and my conversation with them is about, you don't know where the glass walls of your fish tank are. By choosing an inside-out frame, you have decided what your addressable market is, but you haven't done the research. You started with a solution, not started with understanding the needs of your customer. Because the real need in that case is probably, I'd like to reduce my recruitment costs. Yeah, that's probably the real need.
Question from Sikhler.
Chris, the outside in, it sounds like you are big on the empathy phase of the design thinking, as you're explaining. Am I getting you right?
Yes, it is about empathy and framing from that. Yes, from empathy, because that means the customer is more likely to be loyal to you and give you feedback. And if you listen, then it'll hard to go wrong. Okay, so leadership pitfalls. So why doesn't outside in happen? Yeah, so I then start to explore the dimensions of bias, you know, uh, and the cognitive bias there, and the need for data. And I have a view that people don't ask for the data they need because they don't want to know the answer, right? They're quite often, they framed the challenge from an inside out point of view, and they believe that their answer is the right one, and therefore they don't look for an impartial view of data because effectively they're looking to reinforce their bias. And I think that's human nature to some extent. We all want to be successful and we want to be the one that solves the problem. William?
Yeah, I think this speaks to the fact that we pay the C-level straight away for the work that they do within the 2 or 3 years that they do it. If they paid them 7 years later, they wouldn't have the attitude of exactly what you're talking about now, which is ultimately, I need to make sure that I have a really good feather in my cap. I'll get this thing going. It'll look good and I'll walk away. It will carry on for another 6 months to a year and it'll crash on somebody else's watch and I will still look good. I think the real issue is exactly what you say. But the ultimate problem is that leadership doesn't get held accountable well after the fact of what they've done.
I completely agree with that. I would also suggest there's something about learned behavior as well. You know, if you notice people get promoted and the better salaries for those behaviors, the shadow of leadership they cast, you obviously pick it up if you want to get on. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I enjoy being a consultant. Yeah. And then what new ingredients do you really need? And I think I'll probably address this to a lot of CTOs, which is quite often we like to always build again and build from new rather than work with the ingredients that are available and work out, if I use the cocktail example, you know, the base spirit may be vodka and I prefer whiskey. However, what mixer could I put in it? What garnish could I put in it to make it so I enjoy the drink? Whereas quite often we find that there are ingredient suppliers, if I put it that way, right? Tech companies out there who are always promoting, no, you need to completely move from where you are to this new place. And it's quite weird when you think about it. They're an ingredient supplier. And yet we quite often let them drive the agenda of what we do. And that's because we're not anchoring it in the outside in and the goals we should really be trying to achieve. I then talk about confidence. And one of the reasons for talking about confidence is that my reflections are that people, when they show up to work in a company, in some ways kind of lose value for money. You know, if you were going to spend 10,000 on, you know, consumer electronics for your house, you'd probably expect a lot more than when you spend 10,000 in a business environment. And that's partly because of the way structures and sign-offs and functions mean that ownership is less clear to you and consequence is less clear. So I talk a lot in the book about confidence, that employees and leadership in particular should be confident to talk to people, because one of the ingredients in their business is the human. And that goes back to what Howard said at the start from, you know, my posts on LinkedIn, that, you know, I do see technology as support for the talents and artistry of people. It's not always just about automating them out of existence. It's about, for me, it's about enabling people to do more. I could have never done anything in the drinks without, you know, the fact that somebody had built a bottling factory, you know, and Andy had built his own gin distillery, right? If there wasn't other ingredients available to me and other people's capabilities, then I couldn't have done it. But what I did have is the confidence to give it a go. And confidence in your brand, confidence in your solutions, and confidence coming from the morale and energy of your people, you will always, in my view, end up with a better digital solution if people have put some of their passion and thinking into it rather than just gone along for the ride. And I think people can see that. Vodafone in the UK, I think, has some of the worst customer technology in any business. None of the channels hang together, but they spend a lot of money on it. And, I have no confidence when I work with Vodafone as a customer that this stuff's going to happen, right? And that, they've spent the money, they've followed the project management process or the agile process, but it doesn't hang together. And that's because they've not really, in my view, framed it from a customer point of view and project confidence in their communications and the way they work together in the business. So I think people can tell whether they get a vibe when they go on your website or consume your products, whether you care about what you were doing. And I think that's really important. And confidence also builds morale in an organization because you have success. There's a load of stuff about service experience, service design. William?
Yeah. I've been up in the UK for a while. I was lead information architect for EDF Energy, working on the new nuclear new build out there in HPC. And one of the things that I found I had to do in the information, the data, and the IT space is give these guys a vision. And the vision I gave them was simply to say, I want you to see cold children and hungry children. And when you can see cold children and hungry children, and you look back and you say, well, it's because I did this thing wrong, then you understand why we've got to get this right. And by the way, we mustn't blow up the UK while we're at it, right?
Yeah.
And so that, I think, is the problem. There isn't a vision that speaks to the heart of people in the IT space. So they follow the lead of the vendors.
I completely agree with that. And that's kind of what I'm advocating for more, really. Act like a mixologist, think like a mixologist, bring a bit of fun back into digital, recognize there aren't really any constraints, and create a vision from the outside in. And I think that's what you just articulated. Yeah. The reason is that you want electricity, for food manufacturing, and you want energy for a warm home. So that's the output, isn't it? That's actually the service.
It is. The challenge is to make it personal, right? This is the issue that I discovered, because initially I was talking exactly those languages. We've got to keep houses warm. But when you start speaking about children and you give them a picture of a hungry child in their mind, their own child, and you give them a picture of a cold child, their own child, because if you leave the word child there, they will put the child that they know, and it becomes personal. And I think that's the touch that's so missing in pretty much every environment that we are working in, is we've forgotten how to make it personal. And so people are running around like automatons, and it's not really that important.
I completely agree. And I think there are many causes of it. And I think what I'm articulating here is you put these positive things together, and I think you'll get a better outcome. You could say it's leadership because they're not painting that vision and ambition. And I could also say, well, it's because the people specifying the framing the project at the start didn't think in an outside in way anyway. So I think all of these things done badly come together and make a little bit of a joyless technology experience. Yeah. And I don't remember it being like this in the past.
Something, you just said a really important word, right? Something that I've been missing in the IT industry for probably about 15 years. I have been missing people having joy at what they're doing. It's like they know that they're part of a cog in a wheel doing things, and and their real inspiration in life sits at home or somewhere else, but that's not where it is. And it's sad to see that. It really is.
I completely agree with you. And, you know, there's a little bit of me hoping that, you know, the danger of going into the huge AI conversation, but, you know, and I think there's probably some hype in some of the tools like Lovable, but the idea that effectively some of the ingredient vendors get a little bit more competition because people can now do more for themselves, I think hopefully will bring a broader humanity back into technology and challenge us all a little bit more. I think that'll be great.
Yeah, no, we speak the same language there.
So I think this probably follows on a little bit as well. So I think one of the issues I see is around quality of ambition. I think these are two words I didn't often see together, quality and ambition. You know, almost if you're ambitious, that can be seen as a bad thing sometimes, or a mercenary thing. Whereas, and quality is also a very subjective word, but we know what it means when we see it. You know, we all have our view of what's a quality product, a quality experience. So I've tried in the book to bring quality and ambition together and say, what's missing? And I see it a lot in business cases. And one of the things I kind of want to do is at some point write a course about decision making in technology, is that our business cases are so dry, you know, they're just a financial rate of return, and quite often don't really talk about sustainability of the solution. That's, you know, to some extent somebody else's problem. But if we had more quality of ambition, you know, we're going to build a new, you know, company portal, but we want it to be the best. We want it to meet the empathetic needs from an outside in of these people. Our vision is to differentiate. If we create a different quality of ambition, and then we make it a collective ambition, which links back to the data to support that and the leadership and designing a perfect serve, and creating competition, you know, competitive edge. If we had that ambition, which I think we're missing at the moment, it will really drive better digital and give us, you know, more, I guess, joy in what we do, that we're trying to do something better than just turning the handle and producing a mere result. I talked about fish tank syndrome earlier, and again, I don't really see any real constraints on digital. I was always, you know, quite a supporter of TOGAF and Zachman and all of those processes from an engineering point of view, but I do wonder if we need to bring a little bit of creativity back, a little bit of artistry back into technology. You know, we need the solid engineering for the non-functionals, but in the design and the ambition of what we're trying to do, a little bit more creativity, I don't think will hurt.
And then go on. Interesting angle to what you've just said now, right? It's funny, you can pick up two of the same objects, and somehow you get a sense one is actually nicer than the other. They look identical. You can walk into a shop, can pick up, and it's almost as if one was made with a sense of, I really love what I'm doing, and the other one was made with, you know what, I'm just doing something. And there's almost something that gets wrapped up in whatever you're creating. It becomes like a knitted thing between soul and the object. And that's not limited to physical things. That's also whatever you design, whatever you're working with, whatever you're busy with, your attitude on the day. You know, if somebody comes in and they have a bad attitude, you almost need to send them home and say, you know what, I don't want you working on this stuff, because you're going to knit that junk in here. You know, I think we need to see things wider than just the physical.
I completely agree with that, and you know, our book's trying to be a little bit of hope in that regard. But I do think it's also on us when we show up. Yeah, you know, that changes in behaviour are rub off on each other, right? So if we show up with that, wanting to put a bit more passion, a bit more soul into what we do today, then I think other people pick up on it. Yeah. I do appreciate it can be more difficult in bigger organizations, but you know, sometimes showing our fellow humans that we want, you know, we don't want to just lose 8 hours today. We want to have achieved something, I think is a good ambition.
I've found very few people smile.
Yeah.
And smiles are infectious, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's not a great environment to work in.
Yeah. So a little bit of formula then. So I do also talk in the book about flow. And I have some views about how business cases destroy flow. It's, you know, it's very capital equipment driven, stop start and so on. But flow of change, you know, and continuous change. If that energy is greater than resistance, then you end up with digital momentum. And I think it's very hard to, you know, and I've done this a few times when I've, you know, come into organization, that's to reset operating models and org structures and stuff. Getting that momentum going is the most important thing I do, in my view, because what you're trying to do is get some stuff done to show people what good could look like. And then that reduces the resistance for the next set of changes, because going back to confidence, people have seen that confidence. Yeah, they've seen stuff be delivered. Whereas if you stop starting all of the time, it just destroys the flow and the energy, you know, destroys the rhythm in an organization. So there's a fair bit in the book about flow. And, you know, I used to read the Edward de Bono books and really enjoy, you know, that water logic approach to things. Sometimes tricky with finance people in business cases, but, you know, it can be done, interestingly, because once something's in the budget and it's working, it doesn't actually that often get challenged. Decisions are the things that get challenged. So the trick is to get things in momentum, and that helps. And that leads on to organizational physics. So you have inertia in organizations, and I think in large part that comes from functional structures in businesses. If you think back to what I've said about outside in, you know, if I'm a customer, I really don't care there's a finance department, marketing department, sales department, technology department, product department, support department. I don't care at all. But all of our processes and technologies, and particularly in the days of SaaS these days, are very much driven by functions. You know, the HR department goes and hires, you know, buys HiBob or SAP SuccessFactors and then gets the rest of the organization to use it. Finance team go and get Xero or something and get the rest of the organization to use it. Everybody's got a functional SaaS, and trying to make everyone else in the organization to use it. Therefore, you end up with many handoffs in the way that an organization works, which I think is increasing organizational inertia at the moment. But none of it links to an outside-in vision. And I think also there's power games in organizations, often related to the framing, because people feel they're constrained by a set of functional budgets. But I do passionately believe that more than one thing can be true at the same time. It is possible to give people good digital, and it is possible to do it from the outside in, and it is possible to have people working in processes that span functions, which is naturally what they do. But it's a leadership challenge that, and the whole industries, HR and recruitment industries, all set up for functional roles and functional progression, but actually that works against enabling digital to be the art of the deliver the art of the possible. So what's my recipe? Well, organize for success, you know, make conscious decisions about leadership and structure, and whether you want to be outside in, and how you're designing your service or product. And think about a perfect serve. You wouldn't go into a cocktail bar and expect, you know, a vodka shot to just be poured in the pint glass. Yeah, people in those consumer environments think about the perfect serve, the ice, the cocktail umbrella, the mixers, the particular glass they're going to use, and how it's presented on the counter. We see all of this in our own lives, but we don't bring it to work. And the last thing, obviously, is nurture mixologists. There are people there, and you recognize them, who are able to connect 3 or 4 or 5 things together and suggest ways forward. And that skill of integration in mixologists, I think we should nurture going forward. So that's the overview of the book. My final question. So if your tech stack was a cocktail, would you drink it? Would you enjoy that drink? Would your technology and digital solutions be a sophisticated experience or a minesweeper? So those, I don't know whether the phrase travels, but in the UK, a minesweeper is, the end of the night, you'll drink anything that's left. Does your technology architecture have too many base spirits, no garnish? The whiskey hasn't been matured. Yeah. So get mixing things up in a good way. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Really appreciate that. Lots to think about. Any questions? William, I know you may have 1 or 2, but any questions from other people? Sickly, anything from your side?
Yeah, no, he's leaving much food for thought, because we all know we've been through the following architecture, but if you assess the results, a disaster in terms of usability. Was this what was required? So I'm reflecting on his analogy at the beginning of that Ford Mustang, and trying to fit. And my son is gonna love it. He loves Mustangs. So okay, quite interesting. The outside in concept. No, thank you very much, Chris.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And I've got Paul Grobler sitting with me, and I think he's a person that can do this a lot. And Paul really pays attention to the packaging and the whiskey glass and the things like that. And anything from your side, Paul?
Give me a compliment. Yes, actually, no, Chris, thank you very much. This is I'm speaking on how it's my Chris. I'm hoping it comes through. But I found this really to be quite refreshing, and I definitely want to read your book. In fact, please choose the option of picking a number. Because I didn't ask a question, but I really want to win your book. And if I don't win it, I'll buy it. Thank you very much. It was really insightful.
Thanks, Paul. William, any questions from your side, sir?
Yeah, so I suppose the elephant in the room is, how do we get the executives to change their thinking? And I don't really have an answer to that. What I did try at one stage was to try and implement a process view of the business, as opposed, because as you said, it's cross-cutting. Process view as opposed to functional view. We managed to get that right in a complete restructure from 34 different businesses into one SAP ERP system, purely because you've got order to cash, hire to retire. You've got the processes there, and they're all integrated. But I don't know how you do that in a multiple system environment, especially when you've got people who are quite happy with their own system and they've got their little ivory towers and all the rest of it. So I don't know how one gets people to change from functional to flow. But I 100% agree with you. One of the problems we have is we can't see the flow, so we just see ourselves as a tiny little cog in the wheel. At least in the engine, we don't see all the downstream satisfaction and all the rest of it. So I've seen it work, but I don't know how to get it done. That was about 12 years ago. So I don't know how to get it done in today's environment.
Yeah, I don't have all the answers, obviously. I think it's taken us about 20 years to get to this a bit more joyless environment. And I think it's going to take us some time to get back, but I think we have to, because it's not fun turning up to work if you don't make a difference, really, is it? I think in the end, I will always rely on the desire of a chief executive to look good, right? If you want to sort of use a bit of judo logic, right? So let's say a project is, been approved, then if you've got the power over that project, you can deliver it in a sophisticated way, go the extra mile, build a little bit of energy, build a rapport. And I like the example before about two objects that look the same. There will be a perceptible difference in quality. And if that goes well, then leadership will jump upon that and take credit and success for it, and therefore will back you in that team to do more next time, because success always has many owners, right? So, and as an example, I've just done an AI project for a SaaS business in the UK in the home surveying market, and there was very much a worry and behaviours about, well, I want you to build it in a separate environment in case it goes wrong. We don't want anything to do with this in our team. It's blah, blah, blah. But actually, interestingly, what that enabled me to do was to bring in some people with a bit of je ne sais quoi, that I knew from my network. And we built something that really worked, And about 5 weeks ago, I just noticed a change in behaviours from the normal forces of resistance. And now they've embraced the project. Now it's almost like I was never involved, which is absolutely fine. And tomorrow it's being demonstrated at an industry conference. But I tell you, a month ago, no one wanted to stand up and be involved in that project, And I think that's an individual choice to just do something a bit better than... Actually, what's quite good about it is a lot of people used to have such low expectations. We must be able to smash them, right? So, So we all get a little bit of responsibility, and if in that responsibility we do a better job, then great.
One of the things that actually, I love things that inspire us, right? And sometimes what happens is you have a moment that really just changes your thinking. And I got into the lift with one of our project team. The CEO got into the lift, and the CEO started talking to one of the team, this team member. The team member was smiling and happy, and it inspired the conversation between the CEO and that person. Well, for the next about 2 or 3 weeks, the CEO was talking about our project, because that smile and that energy was actually driving a feeling that, this is right. And I think we miss that effect that we can have on people, and especially if it comes from a team member.
Completely agree. And as things in theory get easier with AI doing this and AI doing that, and SaaS solution for everything, there's actually more chance for us to show up and show a bit of magic at work. Yeah, I agree. Anyway, if we're all going to smile a little bit more and all going to make a bit more effort to mix ourselves a cocktail rather than just pour the can of beer in the glass, right?
Right.
And my job is done.
Yeah, fantastic. But except when it comes to whiskey, then we don't want to mix too much.
No.
Fantastic. Chris, thank you very much. So let's go through the process of, we have now 11 people, Chris, excluding yourself. So putting up the hands, if you could mentally choose a number between 1 and 10, I think there are 11 people. Then we'll ask people to lift their hands. And then if you tell us, then we'll find out who it is. Okay, everybody raise their hands. Got a few coming.
I believe it would be 1 to 8.
No, 1 to 8.
Yes, as the three of us are presenters.
Oh, okay. All right. Thanks, Debs. I
Sure.
didn't pay attention to that number.
6.
The number
Six is
6.
number
Chris, is that the one?
Timber.
Timber. Timber, you got to put on
Congratulations,
your
Timber.
video so we can see who you are, where you are.
Yeah,
Hey,
that's
Timber, how you doing?
hi, greetings everyone. How are you doing? This is Temba. I'm connecting from here in Johannesburg.
Oh, fantastic. Nice to, I think this is the
Congratulations.
first time you've joined us, right?
No, this is actually my third time that I'm joining
Oh,
in.
sorry
So,
about that.
yeah, no, it's
Welcome,
okay.
Timber.
Thank you
Have
so
you
much.
got any questions for Chris before you get his book?
Yeah, so I think for me, what's mostly interesting, I think it was raised as part of the chat, is more around mindset, right? A couple of years ago when I was at university, so my background is in data management. I've studied information science. So I've been passionate about the topic since varsity. And I remember reading a couple of books, but I think one book out of the the space of data and technology and stuff was a book on self-help titled "What Got Us Here Won't Get Us There" type of a thing. So I really believe that here in Africa, especially, I feel like a lot of organizations are still stuck in the old ways of doing things because it has always worked in the past. But I kind of feel like with the way things are, going, where the world is going, the future of work and everything, it requires a new type of thinking. So I'm really, really, really interested in trying to find out how do we get leaders, especially, to start thinking about innovation, creativity, new ways of doing things, new ways of skinning a cat and stuff. It does a good analogy. For those who own cats, I don't mean that literally.
Yeah, that could be dangerous.
It could definitely be dangerous. But yeah, I think my question is around that. How do we actually get the leadership starting to think differently about the future of work? And maybe let me add to that. One of the things which we are picking up, from the ground is that sometimes leaders interpret innovation as a threat, right? Especially when it comes from the subordinates. If I report to you, Chris, and I'm coming up with creative ideas and stuff, it seems as if I'm a threat to you because I know more than you do and stuff. So maybe another potential question could be, how do we inspire leaders to start seeing creativity from the team members not as threat, but as an opportunity to put together different skill sets from the team members to really take organizations forward. So yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, I think that's my question.
Yeah, sure. Let me give you a couple of. I think there was a couple of questions in there for me. Let's go back to how do we get leaders to embrace things more, right? So let me give you an example. I'm working on a project at the moment to understand why people find it so difficult to implement HubSpot, the CRM tool. And in every organization I go in, there is a challenge that, sorry, I'm just going to put the discount code in the chat. There's a challenge that about articulation. So in HubSpot is meant to enable you to join up your sales and marketing and help grow the business, yeah? And a lot of HubSpot consultants out there are now calling themselves RevOps people, which actually is a little bit of process, but it's really a data management job, yeah? It's about how do you make sure the data is up to date in HubSpot so that you blah, 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 and your reports work and all the rest of it. However, there's a few issues there. One is that it's defined inside out. So the assumption is if I put in a CRM, my data will be better. I tell you, in 25 years of knowing CRM since the days of Siebel, if you can't get your salesperson to fill in some information about their meeting, it doesn't matter how much you've spent on your CRM, it will be useless, right? So because people have framed that problem as inside out, not outside in, yeah. The outside in problem is what's in it for the salesperson to give a company an update, right? Now, they're obviously worried about their jobs. salespeople. They've got targets to meet and they're worried about their jobs. Okay. So the real answer to getting salespeople to give accurate information is not RevOps and it's not CRM. It's about being a good leader that doesn't effectively have a hire and fire mentality, and within reason will coach salespeople and coach them through deals. Then actually updating the CRM is not a big decision for them. It's about well, obviously the company needs to know what's going on, right? And the data management gets easier. It's not really about whether me telling the truth or not as a salesperson, right? Because I'm trying to manage my incentive scheme. I'm trying to manage, am I going to make it here? And I actually, to be honest, we all know what customers are like. One day a deal might be in the bag and the next day it won't, right? But I'm being asked to put a electronic concrete promise into the CRM system. So one of the things that I'm working on is how do we reframe the problem from an outside in? So if I went to a CEO and said, would you like confidence in your pipeline? They're all going to say yes, right? Because we all know that they go to board meetings, shareholder meetings, and have to effectively say the revenue we're going to make next quarter is this. Okay, so let's empathize with the CEO, put ourselves in their shoes. They're going, if we define from an outside in what's their problem, they don't want to look stupid when they read out the sales pipeline numbers, and they don't want to get caught out next quarter when somebody says last quarter didn't come in, right? So if I say, do you want confidence in your pipeline? They understand that. If I say, oh, you really need to invest in RevOps, yeah, or you need to really invest in this technology, they don't understand it, right? And they think that you don't understand them, and life gets harder. And if I build on that to come to the innovation piece, yeah, what does a CEO hear innovation as? They hear it as risk, yeah. I mean, somebody on the call earlier on talked about, people are here to 2 to 3 years, they want a success and they want to go before the carnage hits, yeah. That whole negative mentality in a lot of CEOs is about risk. So they hear the I word and they're starting to feel risk, because like innovation naturally is riskier than doing boring things, isn't it? So how do we frame innovation from their point of view? Yeah. Partly, I think the answer is about confidence. If you portray yourself as the person that's taking responsibility and is going to deliver that innovation, yeah. But if you just articulate it as innovation, they're just going to hear risk. But if you frame it in, I can get you what you want from an outside in point of view, and it happens to be innovative, right? So you've heard the phrase, you must have heard the phrase, sell the benefits, right? Sell the sizzle, not the sausage, right? It's all the same game with leadership. You just have to think from their point of view. What do they want? What did the CEO of the survey SaaS software company want? They wanted to launch a new product that was better than the competitors. The answer happened to be their first AI project. If I just tried to sell, I'm going to give you some innovative AI, wouldn't be interesting. I can give you product market differentiation by Q1 2026. They'll buy that. So I think in part it's on us to think outside in and think about them when we ask. Hope that helps.
I suppose it's about learning to talk business rather than learning to talk technology or data management or data quality. It's about what is going to change their life and how do we relate to the business side of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Chris, thank you so much.
It's interesting. One of the things that helped me to be quite successful in these things is to make good friends with the secretaries of the C-level. Because they're able to help you to think in the right way. Because they have to think your way and they have to think that executive's way as well. And yeah, that helped me also with the little catchphrases and things like that were useful. So
great. Chris, Chris, thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your update and for your book. We look forward to that. And thank you for presenting to us. That was great. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. And if any of you have any feedback, I'd be very happy to receive it. Yeah. Thank you.
We'll do that. Thanks everybody.
Chris.
Thank
Very
you so
refreshing.
much.
Thank you, Howard.
Thank you, Chris.
Nice.
Thanks,
Timber,
guys.
could you drop
Thanks,
your
Chris.
email address?